Hey guys, welcome to another clip view video. Today we're going to be talking about a biography piece on Miyamoto. I did grab a picture, so this is what his gravesite looks like over in Japan. Similar to some places, this is just a little more bigger than others, but we'll get into it. I apologize, it's going to be a little bit of a longer video than usual. The last day in the cave. The cave was cold that morning, the kind of cold that clings to the skin like damp cloth. Light entered into a thin blade, slipping past the jagged mouth of Ryagando, painting the floor in a pale silver strip. Outside, the wind moved through the pines with a low, restless sigh, carrying the faint, briny scent of the sea from far below. Inside, the air was heavy, with the mineral tang of wet stone, the musk of old straw mats, and the faint sharp smell of ink. From somewhere deeper in the cave came the patent drip, drip, drip of water landing into a shallow pool, each drop echoing in the silence. Miyamoto Musashi sat cross-legged on a woven mat. His back was straight, despite the years weighing on him. A rough plank balanced on two stones served as his writing table, where an inkstone, horsehair brush, and parchment rested beneath river rocks. Beside him lay his armor, lacquered, dulled, leather straps worn soft by decades of use, and the paired swords that had shaped his life. At 60 years of age, his skin was weathered like old leather, lined from years of wind and sun. His hands calloused, fingers slightly bent from countless grips on a hilt, moved with deliberate care as he dipped the brush into ink. The smell of pine smoke drifted faintly from the valley, mingling with the scent of the sea and the damp of the stone around him. Those were not the words of the Book of the Five Rings. That scroll was already finished. This was something different, short, sharp, distilled. Dokudo, the way of walking alone. 21 lines. No ornament, no apology. Each stroke of the brush was like the last cut of a duel, measured, final, irrevocable. Accept everything just the way it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Never stray from the way. When the final stroke dried, Musashi set the brush aside. Beyond the cave's entrance, the valley lay under morning mist, cedars swinging and swaying gently. A crow called from somewhere unseen. The taste of the air was clean, metallic, with the promise of rain. This was the end of the road. But before the light could fade from his eyes, he looked back. Back at a memory carried him not to a battlefield, nor to a duel, but to a winter long ago, when the world itself was caught between war and peace, and his own story had only just begun. Chapter 1. The Boy from Miyamoto, 1584 to 1597. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes over the valley, muffling the sound of the distant river. The world seemed caught in a held breath, as if nature itself waited for something unseen. Beneath the white draped pines, a thin column of smoke rose from the thatched roof of a lone house, a small dot against the vastness of Hariyama Province. Inside, the air smelled of pine, resin, and warm straw. A low fire burned in the hearth, its glow soft against the dark wood walls. The wind rattled the paper shoji screens, but within, all attention was fixed on the quiet drama unfolding in the center of the room. A young woman, her hair damp with sweat, clutched the futon. As the midwife murmured encouragement. Beside her knelt a man in a plain indigo kimono, posture straight, expression unreadable. Shinmin Munasai, warrior, duelist, and teacher, watched his son's first moments. I probably just said that wrong. Munisai. Munisai. Oh. Anyways, he watched his son's first moments with the same focus he gave to the draw of a blade. Outside, snow hissed as it struck the embers in the ash pit. Inside, the boy's first cry rose into the rafters. The year was 1584, and Japan stood on the edge of transformation. The Sengoku Jedi? Yeah. The age of warring states had scarred the land with a century of battles. Armies still marched, banners still clashed in the wind, but already the long shadow of peace crept over the horizon. Munasai took the infant in his arms, the boy's tiny fist clenched and unclenched, as if already reaching for something unseen. Perhaps it was imagination, or perhaps it was something more. But in the child's eyes, he thought he saw the unyielding glint of steel. The boy's name was Shinmin Ben Osuke. The world would remember him as Miyamoto Musashi. Biggie, shh! Chapter 2. Childhood and the Temple. Okay. Musashi's earliest memories were of movement and sound. The slap of bare feet on wooden floors, the creak of tatami mats, the sharp shriek of a blade clearing its saya. The Shin household was modest, yet every corner carried the scent of a warrior's life. Above the hearth, spears rested on wall racks, their lacquered shafts gleaming in the firelight. In the shadows, bundles of bamboo for practice swords leaned like stalks in a windless field. His father, Shinmin Munasai, was a man of few words and precise gestures, a master of the Tori Ryu style and skilled in both the sword and jute. Munasai taught less with praise and correction than the relentless demonstration. To watch him draw was to see inevitably in motion, one fluid, unbroken arc from stillness to strike. In the mornings, before the mist had burned from the river, Munasai led his son into the courtyard. The air was cool and wet with dew. The wooden practice swords slick in their small hands. Beneath the towering cedars, Musashi learned his first lessons: stance, balance, grip. His father told him that a poor stance was like a house without a foundation. It would collapse under the first blow. The boy's palms blistered from endless drills, and his wiry frame often ached with fatigue. Yeah, I was a wiry-framed kid too. Yet each day as the sun sank behind the hills and night birds called from the forest, his movements grew steadier. He began to feel the rhythm of the sword. the invisible heartbeat that guided both attack and defense. When he was not training, Musashi roamed the countryside. He waded in cold streams where carp flashed like silver arrows. He climbed grassy hills and watched the distant smoke of villages curling into the sky. Cicadas shrilled in the summer heat. In winter, the wind moaned across the frozen thatch. Even in play, the world reminded him of the warrior's path. Ashigaru marching with spears slung over the shoulders, their armor rattling faintly like laughter clad in steel. But childhood was brief. His mother, Omasa, vanished from his life while he was still young. Some say she died, and others that she was sent away. By the age of 7, Musashi had lost both parents and was placed in the care of his uncle, Dornbo, a Buddhist priest. Life at the temple is one of quiet discipline. The scent of burning incense coiled through the air, mingling with the early smell of damp tatami, paper soji whispered open and closed, letting in silver of sunlight. So, soji, paper soji, those were the inner doors. And you could have multiple doors to form a whole wall, and that was done deliberately so you can open inside and rearrange them how you feel fit to let in more light or not, to make a space bigger from one room to another. So that's what those paper sojis were. Dornbo taught him to read the curling brushstrokes of kanji, to paint them with steady hands, and to bow before the Buddha with humility. Yet the boy's heart was not still. When he swept the courtyard, his eyes followed the way wind bent the grass, or how a heron's shadow stretched over the pond before it struck for fish. He carried himself not like a child, but like a coiled bowstring, always taut, always ready. By 12 he had grown tall for his age, his frame wiry but strong, his skin rough with patches of eczema. Whether from neglect or defiance, he often went days without bathing. But when he took up the bokken, even the monks fell silent, unsettled by the intensity in his gaze. Musashi was no ordinary child. He was already walking the narrow path between discipline and instinct. Temple quiet and battlefield roar, the foundation of a life were being laid, one that would soon be tested by blood. Chapter 3. The First Duel. It was the depth of winter when Musashi's life took its first violent turn. The year was 1596, and the village square lay hushed beneath a pale sun. The air was sharp enough to sting the lungs, and the smell of damp earth mingled with wood smoke drifting from morning hearths. Farmers, children, and old men gathered in uneasy silence, the breaths clouding in the cold. A wandering samurai had come, Oriyama Kaihe, of the Shinto Ryu school. His reputation traveled before him, thought his presence was more bluster than legend. His polished katana glinted as he tested its weight in the morning light, its steel singing faintly as it cut the air. He had nailed a challenge notice to the village gate, daring any man to test his skill. No one except the boy was to answer. Shinmin Benosuke, barefoot, hair wild, no more than 13, stepped forward carrying only a crude bokken, a length of oak smooth by use, but still smelling faintly of resin. His uncle, Adorable, tried to pull him back, but the boy's feet were already set on the packed dirt. Kai's expression was one of easy contempt, his voice loud and mocking. "Boy, do you even know how to die without dignity?" Musashi said nothing. His father's lessons had given him few words, but many instincts, and instincts told him to wait. The breeze shifted, bringing the faint smell of river mud and wildflowers. The dragonfly darted between them, its wings catching the sun like shards of glass. For a heartbeat, time held still. Then Kai moved. His sandals grounded the earth, his blade flashing upward in a silver arc. Musashi stepped forward, not back. He met the strike with the full weight of his body, driving the bokken down like a hammer. The crack of wood against bone echoed across the square. Kai staggered, ribs splintering under a second blow, and collapsed into the dirt. His sword slipped from his hand, its edge dulled by defeat, before it had even tasted blood. The cicada sang on indifferent. The crowd was silent, the only sound the restless wind moving through the cedars. In less than 10 heartbeats, it was over. Musashi stood above his fallen opponent, his breath steady, eyes unreadable. This was not glory, it was survival. And somewhere deep inside, the boy understood. From this moment on, his path would walk the narrow bridge between death and victory. When he turned to leave, the villagers parted silently, as if recognizing something both fearsome and inevitable. The shadow that stretched behind him was no longer the shadow of a boy. It was already the shadow of a man. Chapter 4. Leaving the village. By 15, the boy from Miyamoto had become a young man with no taste for small life. The morning he left, the sky was the pale gray of wet stone, and mist clung low over the rice fields. A single crow called from a bare branch, its voice echoing across the damp air. He carried little, a travel-worn robe, a bundle of rice wrapped in cloth, and the bokken that already tasted blood. His father did not walk him to the edge of the village. That was not their way. Munasai's parting gift was silence, a silence that carried both approval and challenge. Musashi knew what it meant. The training was over. The proving had begun. The road wound narrow through the countryside, a ribbon of dirt lined with tall grass that hissed when the wind passed through them. Farmers bent beneath baskets. Merchants called from roadside stalls. The stray dogs nosed through gutters. The air smelled of damp earth, charcoal smoke, and the faint, bitter tang of pickled vegetables. At night he slept under trees or in the corners of stables when an innkeeper was kind. The earth was hard, the insects loud, and sometimes the howl of wolves echoed from distant hills. He would lie awake beneath the constellations, his father once pointed out. Orion, the Pleiades, the North Star, wondering if those same stars had guided warriors before him. His sandals wore thin quickly, rough edges cutting his heels raw. Dried millet cakes, bitter greens, or fish charred over roadside fires filled his stomach when coin was scarce. Yet every ache, every hunger became another lesson. To leave home with nothing but a wooden sword is to learn the world through your feet. Every step is training, every sound, smell, and taste is part of the way. He met others along the road, ronin without masters, monks with prayer beads clicking softly in their hands, pilgrims bound for shrines where incense curled in the wind. Some shared food, some shared warnings of bandits in the forest passes, of lords hiring swords for causes neither noble nor just. Once in a tea house along the highway, an older samurai studied him across the room. The man's gaze lingered not on Musashi's face, but on the bokken leaning against the wall. When their eyes met, the samurai gave the faintest nod. It was not praise, nor invitation. It was recognition, from one who knew the path of the warrior. By the time he reached Kyoto, the air heavy with the mingled scents of incense and river water, Musashi was no longer simply a boy who had won a duel. He was a swordsman on the road, bound not for a place, but for the way itself. And in Kyoto, destiny waited. Chapter 5. Kyoto and the Yoshioka School. Kyoto in the early 1600s was a city of contrast. Temple bells tolled over narrow valleys where merchants hawked fish and silken cloth. Incense curled above rooftops while the calls of vendors mixed with the clatter of wooden wheels on stone. The Kamo River cut through the city like a silver thread, carrying the scents of water and smoke, while in the distance the tile eaves of 1,000 shrines glimmered beneath the shifting light. Here martial reputation was currency, and none held more sway than the Yoshioka school of swordsmanship. The Yoshioka had long been instructors to the Ashiga shoguns. Their banners flew proudly over their dojo, their students carrying themselves with the arrogance of men who believed their art unassailable. A challenge was inevitable. Musashi, a ronin barely in his 20s, unkempt and unarmed with nothing but a wooden bokken, was an affront to their pride. Whispers of his duels reached Kyoto quickly, and soon his name and the Yoshioka's honor were set on a collision course. The first match was arranged against Yoshioka Saijiro, head of the school. The morning was damp and cool. The pine grove outside the city sobbed with fallen needles. Saijiro arrived in formal dress, his katana gleaming, his stance calm and deliberate. Musashi arrived late, barefoot, his robe plain, his bokken loose in one hand. Onlookers shifted uneasily as the two men faced each other. When they moved, it was sudden, sharp, final. The crack of wood striking flesh. Musashi's blow shattered Shirajiro's shoulder in an instant. The master collapsed, his spotless sleeve darkening with blood. Humiliation burned deeper than wounds. A second duel was set, this time with Shirajiro's younger brother, Chiro, in the weak winter sun. Before another tense gathering, Musashi's wooden blade struck again, swift and merciless. Shiro fell dead. The Yoshioka could no longer risk open combat. Their name demanded vengeance, but their skill no longer matched the threat. They prepared an ambush at Ichijo-ji Temple, dozens of armed men waiting among the trees. That morning the air smelled faintly of rain. Musashi arrived early. Oh, it's my neighbor. That morning the air smelled faintly of rain. Musashi arrived early, anticipating their trap. He stepped from the shadows with a weapon in each hand, long and short wooden swords, revealing the style that would become his signature. 19 Ichiraiu, two heavens as one. The grove erupted in violence, steel clashing against wood, shouts of men mingling with the thud of bodies striking earth. Musashi moved like a storm, one blade reaching, the other guarding, both flowing unbroken rhythm. The survivors fled, leaving silence broken only by a creak of pine branches overhead. From that day forward, Kyoto no longer spoke of Musashi with curiosity. His name was not rumor, it was warning. He was no longer merely a wanderer with a bokken, he was a force of nature. Chapter 6 Rise of a Master. After Kyoto, the name Musashi spread like storm wind across Japan. He walked the highways as a ronin still, yet wherever he went, challengers followed. Samurai eager for glory, students desperate to test themselves, rivals sent to avenge the fallen. Some duels were fought in castle courtyards, banners snapping in the wind, others in village squares, with farmers pausing mid-step to watch. Many took place on lonely roads where the only witness were the crows in the trees. Each fight honed him further. His timing grew unpredictable, his rhythm unnerving, unnerving, his very presence unsettling. Some opponents claimed they could not read his eyes. Others swore he was reading theirs. Many expected the flash of steel, but Musashi met them with carved wood. To fall against a man who did not even draw a blade was to be stripped of more than pride. By his late 20s, Musashi had become less a man than a force, an inevitable that seemed to drift into towns like a gathering storm. Lords sought his service, warriors sought his instructions, and common folk whispered his name in tones that mixed awe with fear. Yet his wandering was not only for combat. In port cities he saw Dutch and Portuguese ships, their high hulls bristling with sails. He spoke with traders whose clothes and language were strange to him. In the mountains he met Yamabushi, a warrior monk, who taught that the sword was not only a weapon, but a tool of spirit. From each encounter he absorbed a lesson, tucking it quietly into the growing arsenal of his mind. Still, one name rose above the rest, spoken in barracks and tea houses, on the lips of rivals: Sasaki Kojiro. Kojiro was renowned for his great Nodachi sword. So long it had earned the name, the drying pole. His signature technique, the Tsubame Gashi, the swallow's return. That was a weird sound, okay. Was said to mimic the sudden darting flight of a swallow. Its strike almost impossible to block. Where Musashi was raw, adaptively, Kojiro was elegance and precision. They were opposites, mountain and sea, storm and tide. A duel between them was inevitable. But before the fateful morning on Gunrail Island, to understand the weight of what was to come, one must understand the soul of the samurai itself. One must understand the katana. The katana, the soul of the samurai. There is a moment just before a sword is drawn when the world holds its breath. The silk-wrapped suka warms beneath the palm. The suka is the handguard. The weight of the saya rests against the hip. The saya would be the, the sheath. The faint scent of oil and lacquer rises, mingling with the heartbeat in the ears. And then in one motion, steel clears wood. The light runs along the blade from guard to tip like water over stone. It is not just a weapon. It is history given form, spirit forged in fire. In Japan, the katana was called the soul of the samurai. Its story began centuries before Musashi. Early swords, the straight chokuto, came from Chinese and Korean influence. It's very true. If you look back to the old Chinese swords, they're the ones that actually had the bamboo rods put into the handle to lock the handle to the blade. So that was pretty interesting. I didn't know that there was Chinese and Korean influence, but give credit where credit's due. Functional but brittle. As warfare evolved, the sweeping tachi emerged, ideal for mounted strikes, but on the Sengoku battlefields, close combat demanded something faster, more adaptable. The blade was shortened, its curve refined, its edge worn facing up for a quicker draw. Thus the katana was born, not in a single stroke, but in the long forge of necessity and war. The swordsmith's forge. To step into a swordsmith's workshop was to step into fire. The air struck hot, thick with the smell of charcoal. Sparks leapt from the tatara furnace, where iron sand was melted and smelted into tamahagani. Okay, I just said that right. Steel. The smith hammered, folded, hammered again, driving out impurities until strength and flexibility fused in a single body. So yeah, they would heat it up until it was glowing hot. He would set it down. There would be two people and the master himself. And the master would hit, one guy would hit, another guy would hit, and you would get this little rhythm, and it would be like, as they took turns, so wherever the master hit is where the other two would have to aim their hit, and then they would flatten that out. Then he would grab like an axe, and they would set it there in the middle, and they would hammer it to create a nice groove in it so they can fold it over. So what was one piece, folded over, came two, and came four came 8, and that's how they got layers and layers building up. Oh, where was I? The blade was coated with clay, thick along the spine, thin at the edge. When heated until it glowed the color of dawn, with a hiss and burst of steam, it plunged into water, the edge hardened to a razor's bite, while the spine stayed supple. Along the cooled steel ran the hamon, the tamper line. Each one's a unique as a fingerprint. Kind of like the inside of a barrel. When you fire a bullet, you can always track that bullet back to the gun, because of when the bullet's going through the barrel, it gets notches and stuff, so it's like a fingerprint. I thought that was kind of cool and interesting at the same time. Polishers then revealed the spirit of the blade. So after they formed it, they would hand it over to polishers, and then polishers were the one to pretty much bring out something rough because it's already in the shape. They just need to polish it up and sharpen it. This is where the handle gets made, and well, the rest of the process. It never just ended with the blacksmith. It always went further. Polishers then revealed the spirit of the blade. Days of careful strokes with white stone brought out the gleam, until the katana mirrored the world around it. The katana in life. For a samurai, the katana was more than weapon. It was identity, duty, and soul. A man was measured not only by his deeds, but by the steel he carried. To touch another's sword without permission was an insult. To draw it without intent was dishonor. That's kind of what I was saying in my last video. They only drawed it when they had to use it, or were going to use it. Biggie, lay down. On the battlefield, it was the weapon of last resort. Yet in a duel, it was everything. The moment of truth distilled into a single draw. Every piece had its name and spirit. Kasaki, the tip where precision met danger. I will make another video where I'll have the katana sitting out in front of me, working on trying to get different ones so I can show you. This is a katana, this is an old katana, and this is a tanto, so you guys get an understanding that samurai use multiple tools in their everyday. So the kasaki is the tip, ha, the edge, keen enough to split silk drifting on air. The mune, or the spine, strong yet resilient. The hamon, which we were talked about, the shimmering line mark of the forge. The suka, the hilt. Gray skin and silk binding spirit to hand. The suba, which I told you. The guard, both shielded and canvas of artistry. The saya, also spoke of. The lacquered scabbard, concealing both death and honor. So, give you a little idea of all the different parts, but this is just a short little idea of how many parts go into the katana. The katana was ceremonial, symbol, companion, and sometimes coffin. Laid beside its owner in death, the final bond unbroken. Musashi and the blade. Musashi owned fine swords, yet he was never bound by them. He wielded boken as readily as steel. He carved an oar into a weapon on his way to battle. His school, Naitin Ichirao, broke tradition itself by wielding both katana and wakizashi together. Wakizashi's another sword. It's just, I think it's a shorter one. Like I said, I'll get into more detail. Long and short in harmony. To him, the katana was not the way. It was a tool of the way. And on Ganryu Island, he would prove that the true weapon was not steel, but the mind and spirit that wielded it. Chapter 7. The Duel on Ganryu Island, 1612. Some battles are written on ledgers, others are carried on in hushed voices over tea. But a few, rare as snow falling and cherry blossoms, become legend. The duel between Miyamoto Musashi and Sasaki Kajiro was such a battle. The challenger. By 1612, Musashi's name was a storm rolling across Japan, unbeaten in duels, unpredictable in style. His opponent, Sasaki Kojiro, was equally renowned. Tall, broad-shouldered, elegant in bearing, he wielded the nodachi, a great two-handed sword so long it had earned the name the drawing pool. His signature strike, the Tsubamagashi, or swallow's return, was said to mimic the sudden darting flight of swallows, swift, deceptive, and almost impossible to block. Where Musashi was raw power tempered with rhythm, Kojiro was precision honed to elegance. They were as opposites, mountain sea. Oh, there we are, the island. The chosen ground was Funajima, later called Ganryojima. You guys can actually go and visit that if you go to Japan. And then it's pretty cool. It's definitely an interesting place. A narrow crescent of sand in the common strait, hemmed by black rocks and crowned with wind-twisted pines. The restless tide hissed over the shore, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp against the morning stillness. Kojiro arrived first, resplendent in deep indigo robes, his long sword gleaming at his side. He waited at the water's edge, his stance calm but coiled, the sea breeze tugging at his sleeves. Musashi's arrival. Minutes passed, then an hour. Kojiro's jaw tightened as he scanned the horizon. Finally, a boat appeared, cutting slowly across the strait. Musashi sat in the stern, rowing with unhurried strokes. In his hands was no katana, but the boat's oar, roughly whittled during the crossing into the shape of a sword. Shavings of pale wood still clung to its edges, and it smelled faintly of the sea. When the prow kissed the sand, Musashi stepped out barefoot. His hair was uncombed, his robe plain and creased. He did not bow. He did not hurry. Kojiro's eyes flashed in a burst of fury. He flung his scabbard into the surf. "If you have no need of it," Musashi said, to have remarked, "you have already lost." So in other words, it's like an insult to throw your sheath, because when they fight, their sheath is always on their side. And in fact, some styles show you how to use the sheath as another weapon in another hand. The duel. They faced each other as the tide crept in around their ankles. Their air was tight with silence, the pause before a storm. Kojiro moved first. The great Nudashi flashed upward in the first arc of the swallow's return, its edge singing through the air like frozen lightning. But Musashi had already closed the distance. His oar sword swept down with crushing force, wood meeting bone in a single decisive crack. The sound rose above the surf and the gulls, the sound not of steel on steel, but of finality. Kojiro staggered. His sword slipped from his grasp, clattering into the wet sand. A moment later he fell, the tide rushing forward to claim him. For a heartbeat only the wind and waves moved. Musashi turned without flourish, the oar still in his hand, and walked back toward the waiting boat. His footprints filled with seawater and vanished as though he had never been there at all. The lesson. The day Musashi had not simply defeated an opponent, he had defeated expectations. He proved that timing could be sharper than steel, and that the mind could be deadlier than a blade it guided. The duel ended on a strip of sand, but its echo would carry across centuries. Chapter 8. The Seeker of Strategy, 1612 to 1640. After Ganryu Island, the world expected Miyamoto Musashi to settle into glory. He could have opened a school, gathered disciples, and lived the rest of his days retelling the duels that had sealed his legend. But Musashi was not built for stillness. Victory was never his destination. It was only a milestone on an endless road. Road less walked. He left the island as quickly as he arrived, vanishing into the veins of Japan's countryside. Veins would be like the walking paths that carved into the nature around. The roads wound through valleys heavy with bamboo, across ridges where the wind tasted of pine resin, past villages where the air smelled of boiling rice and drying fish. He slept in temples when monks allowed, in barns when farmers were kind, and under the stars when neither was possible. The duels continued, but their nature shifted. Many were fought with bouquet rather than steel. Victories won without blood. His rhythm was changing, from single strikes toward an understanding of the greater flow, the shape of whole battles. The eye of a strategist. Musashi began to see combat differently. To him, a duel was no longer just the contest of two men. It was a puzzle of terrain, timing, and will. He studied archers, spearmen, mounted cavalry. He watched how troops maneuvered through mountain passes, how the beat of drum could turn the tide of any army. Quote, "Perception is strong and sight weak," Hilaire wrote. "In strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close, and to take a distant view of close things." I like that. It's a good quote. His days filled with quiet practice, the feel of damp grass beneath his bare feet at dawn, the rasp of brush on parchment as he recorded fleeting thoughts, the sound of wind slippering through temple eaves while he sat in meditation, replaying imagined battles behind closed eyes. A shift in the era. Japan itself was changing. The Tokugawa shogunate had brought uneasy peace after centuries of war. Many ronin drifted without purpose, their swords dulled by neglect rather than use. Musashi adapted. In the 1610s, he is believed to have served in the military actions, sometimes fighting, more often advising. His counsel was valued as highly as his blade. By the time of the Shimabara Rebellion in 1637, Musashi was no longer rushing into frays. He stood instead at the map table, tracing the lines with his finger, listening to the muffled creak of armor in the war council chamber. Art, brush, and blade. As the edge of war dulled, Musashi turned increasingly to art. Ink was wash painting flowed from his brush. I'll read that again. Ink, wash painting flowed from his brush. I don't know if I wrote that right. Oh. Landscape stark yet balanced. Strokes as bold and restrained as his swordsmanship. One scroll showed a lone bird on a bare branch, the space around it as deliberate as the ink. They have a saying for a space like that. So that like the spacing between words or space between even the letters or maybe a space between one petal of a flower to the next petal. That's what they call moth. I'll get into some of their philosophies and teachings. I can come up with quite a bit. I'll make it just a video naming off all of them that I have found so far. But Ma itself is going to be a long one. And then there's another one where the words have meaning. That's going to be another good one I'm going to have to do. He carved wooden sculptures, practiced calligraphy, and even designed architectural layouts, each work echoing the same principle as his duels: timing, rhythm, balance. The smell of pine soot ink became as familiar to him as the scent of steel. The weight of a brush in his hand felt no different from the weight of a wakizashi. Service to Hosokawa. Around 1640, Musashi entered the service of Lord Hosokawa Tadatoshi of Kumamoto, not as a hired sword, but as a living embodiment of martial wisdom. He walked the castle grounds in plain robes, gravel crunching underfoot, pausing to watch soldiers train. His words were sparse, offered like single brushstrokes at just the moment they were needed. Here's another quote I took. It says, "If you wish to control others, you must first control yourself. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men." The world still called him a swordsman, but Musashi had already stepped beyond the sword. He was becoming something rarer, a man seeking the way itself in all things. Chapter 9, The Cave and the Scroll, 1643 to 1645. There comes a time in a warrior's life when the sword no longer teaches, when the lessons are found not in the clash of steel, but in the stillness between breaths. By the 1640s, Musashi was in his 60s, an old age for a man who had walked the bloodied roads of Sengoku and early Edo eras. His hair had silvered, his frame thinned, but his eyes remained sharp, not only seeing what lay before him, but the patterns behind it. His body had carried him through duels, skirmishes, and campaigns. Now it carried him toward silence, the road to Ryagando. He withdrew to Ryagando, the spirit rock, cave outside Kumamoto. The path wound through low hills dotted with camellias and bamboo groves. In spring, their blossoms spilled pink and white across the trail. In summer, the air grew heavy with the resin of warm earth. Along the roadside stood small stone statues of Jesus, the guardian of travelers and children. Their surfaces were worn smooth by centuries of hands and wind. As the path narrowed, the sound of the valley faded. Ahead came a different sound, a hollow, airy, echoey, like a breath drawn deep into the mountain itself. A cave. The entrance yawned dark and uneven, jagged stone veined with moss. Inside, the light dimmed to a silver gray. The air was cold, carrying the mineral tang of wet rock, the faint salt note of the distant sea, and the musty scent of straw. Beneath his bare feet, the ground alternated between packed earth and slick stone, polished by centuries of dripping water. From the shadows came the slow, steady drip, drip, drip of droplets falling into a hidden pool. The silence there was not absence, but presence, thick and alive, as though the cave itself listened. The writings. Musashi made his retreat simple. a straw mat for sleeping, a low plank on stones for a table, an inkstone brush, parchment weighed with river stones smooth as glass. His armor leaned against the wall, lacquer dulled, straps as soft from decades of wear. His swords rested nearby in plain scabbards, their hilts worn dark by his hand. Here he began to write the Book of the Five Rings. Go-rin no sho. Go-rin no sho is what it translates. It was no memoir, but a manual stripped of vanity, divided into 5 scrolls, each named for an element: earth, the immovable foundation of strategy; water, the art of adapting to flow; fire, the rhythm of attack and counterattack; wind, the study of other schools, their strengths and flaws; void, the unseen truth behind technique. The scratch of brush on parchment mingled with the drip of water and the sigh of wind at the cave mouth. Sometimes he paused, tasting the metallic coolness of the air as though the next line might be hidden in its flavor. Near the end, he composed another work, shorter, sharper, Doppero, the way of walking alone. Only had 21 lines, each a principle, plain and unyielding as the stone around him. I'll give you guys some examples. I'm going to be doing a piece on Doppero. So one of them, accept everything just the way it is. 2, do not seek pleasure for its own sake. 3, never stray from the way. And so on and so forth. The final day, when the last stroke dried, Musashi set down his brush. He dressed in armor one final time, feeling the weight settle against the shoulders. His swords lay before him, blades turned upward. On June 13th, 1645, Musashi died, seated in the Seiza posture, which is, we call it the just legs crossed in front of you, like that. That's the Seiza posture. Not Caesar, Seiza, S-E-I-Z-A. Facing the cave's entrance as though watching the last of the light fade from the valley. There was no audience, only the smell of ink, the echo of water, and the stillness of a man who had walked the way to its very end. Even now, Ryaganda remains. Travelers speak of its breathless air, of the drip of water that seems to measure not seconds, but centuries. Some say that if you wait long enough, you can almost hear the rasp of a brush, or the quiet exhale of a warrior settling down his sword forever. Chapter 10. After Death. The legend lives, 1645 to the present day. When the breath left Musashi's body in Ryagando Cave, the air did not change. The water still dripped into its stone pool. The wind still sighed through the pines outside, but something in the world beyond the cave shifted, quietly at first, then with gathering weight. The funeral and the armor. His body was carried down the narrow mountain path, past camellia trees and the Jizo statues that watched over travelers. The smell of pine and sea salt clung to the procession. Villagers, retainers, and disciples gathered in hushed silence, their faces lit by pale morning light. They dressed him in full armor for the burial, lacquered plates, silk cords, the crest of his family's line. The armor smelled faintly of camphor oil, and most of years of use. At his side lay the long and short swords that had defined path, not as weapons for another life, but as symbols of the one he had mastered, the resting place. Musashi was laid to rest at Musashizuka Park in Kumamoto. Yeah. Even now the air there carries a hush, as if the trees bow toward his stone marker. Moss creeps across the carved kanji, softening their edges. Visitors leave offerings, coins, paper cranes, sprigs of pine. In summer, cicadas sing in waves. In winter, frost makes the grass brittle underfoot. The survival of the school. The school of Nitin Ichi-Ryu did not die with him. His disciples carried his teachings like a flame sheltered in cupped hands. Dojo smelled of polished wood and sweat. Their air alive with the swish of bamboo sword and the sharp crack of wood on wood. Scrolls of his writings were stored in cedar chests, their paper yellowing but still crisp. His brushstrokes studied as though they were cuts of a blade. Students bowed before his calligraphy, tracing each line with their eyes. They repeated his words not as relics, but as living guidance. Do nothing that is of no use. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. Those are also lines from Dokuro. A spirit in stone and ink. His book, The Book of Five Rings, traveled far beyond Japan. Its pine soot ink and rice paper gave way to clean scent of Western printing presses. Translations appeared in English, French, Russian. Generals, businessmen, artists, athletes alike sought his lessons, finding them not just strategy for combat, but rhythm for life. Bronze statues rose in his honor. Figures of a man in plain robes, two swords at his side, eyes fixed on unseen horizons. The metal grows hot in summer sun, cold as steel in winter wind. Tourists run their hands along the hilts, polished smooth by countless touches. The cave today, Ryugando, remains a place of pilgrimage. To step inside is to feel the air change, cool, damp, with the scent of moss and stone. The drip of water echoes endlessly, a rhythm that may have measured Musashi's final hours. Outside, the pines still sway, their needles whispering with the same voice he once heard. Some visitors claim that in the right light, you can almost see him seated there still. Brush in hand, armor at his side, pausing before writing a line that would outlive him by centuries. The edge that endures. Musashi's death was not the closing of a story, but the opening of a legend. His life was not that of a man who sought death, nor victory for its own sake. It was the life of a man who walked the way without compromise, who saw no separation between the strike of a blade, the stroke of a brush, or the stillness of a mountain cave. His body lies beneath the earth, but his shadow stretches across centuries. It moves wherever a blade has drawn with purpose, wherever a mind sharpens itself against challenge, wherever a person chooses the hardest road, not for gain, but for mastery. The man is gone, the legend remains, and the edge endures. Closing paragraph. The way beyond the way. At the mouth of Ryugando Cave, the wind still carries the scent of pine resin and sea salt. The pines lean into the sky as they did centuries ago, their shadows swaying over stone. Inside, water continues its patent rhythm, drop by drop, as if the earth itself remembers. Time has moved on, emperors risen and fallen, cities burned and rebuilt, the old roads paved with stone and steel. Yet Musashi's presence lingers, not in body, but in something sharper, quieter, more enduring. The sword he carried is no longer drawn. The duels that shook villages and schools are long finished. But the way he walked, the way of observation, of rhythm, of clarity, still waits for those who seek it. To read his words is to feel the weight of silence before a strike. The sudden rush of water over stone, the emptiness between brushstrokes where meaning takes shape. His legacy is not a museum relic, but a mirror. Each who gazes into it sees not Musashi, but themselves, measured against his unflinching truths. The way is in timing. For one thing known, 10,000 things. For one thing, know 10,000 things. Okay, I read that wrong. Do not collect weapons or practice with many. Do not regret what you have done. These lines are not commands, but lanterns carried down centuries. Some hold them as guidance for combat, others for commerce, others for life itself. The form matters less than the spirit. To live without waste, to walk with balance, to seek mastery over the self before all else. Perhaps this is why the world remembers him not merely as a swordsman, but as something larger, an artist of existence who carved truth from both silence and struggle. In the end, Musashi showed that the way is not in the sword, it is not in the duel, nor the scrolls, nor the cave. The way is everywhere, in the stillness of stone, the flow of water, the fire of conflict, the wind of change, and the void that binds them all. To walk it is to walk beyond time, beyond death, toward the edges that endures. I went ahead and did this for you guys, so I hope that shows up. So if you want to go ahead and pause it, you can read that. That is the actual kanji on his stone. Dokoro, the way of the walking alone. So we'll go through it real quick. Accept everything just the way it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Do not, under any circumstances, depend on partial feeling. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world. Be detached from desire your whole life long. Do not regret what you have done. Never be jealous. Never let yourself be saddened by a separation. Resentment and complaint are appropriate neither for oneself nor others. Do not let yourself be guided by the feeling of lust or love. In all things have no preferences. Be indifferent to where you live. Do not pursue the taste of good food. Do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. Do not act following customary beliefs. Do not collect weapons or practice with weapons beyond what is useful. Do not fear death. Do not seek to possess either goods or fiefs for your old age. Respect Buddha and the gods without counting on their help. You may abandon your own body, but you must preserve your honor. And the last one, 21. Never stray from the way. So So, yep, I did do some double checking and have everything to back it up, so everything there is where you can go and see for yourself that that is or his actual kanji, that is inscription. So that says Miyamoto, and then it says explicitly appears on the monument. And so yeah, that's Miyamoto Musashi, and I believe that one's in the cave. Here's another. That is inside the cave itself. I kind of wish I had a better camera at that time, but I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, it's faintly there. So, thank you guys for listening to all of this. This has definitely been very, very interesting. Long piece. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching.